Welcome to Monday Morning Moments. I'm Mike Van Hoozer. Today I want to introduce Gabe Baker, and he's going to be a part of this series that we're doing on purpose. And we've been talking about living on purpose for a purpose. And in our first session, we talked about discovering your purpose. We've talked about fulfilling your purpose. We've talked about the importance of the reasons for having a purpose and a purpose statement in your life. And last week we talked about what happens if you don't live with purpose and connect to your purpose. And so with Gabe, I want to introduce him, and then I'll let him talk a little bit about his background, and we'll get into some conversation as well. But I think Gabe is an excellent example of somebody who's living on purpose. I got the unique opportunity to meet Gabe as we were leading the leadership development program at Rice. He was a safety on the football team around his freshman year there, and just one of these guys who's, just blossomed in his career and doing things incredible in his life. And he's, doing some things in Nashville. We'll get into that. He's playing in a band for King and Country, and he's been doing some amazing work. I saw him in concert, and he plays in a ton of instruments. So we want to get into all of that. But Gabe, it's great to have you on the podcast, and I'm so glad that you joined us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. I love that you mentioned the leadership class, and I forgot that I was my freshman year, so that brings back some really fond memories.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
really
yeah.
happy to be
Absolutely.
here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad to still be connected to you as well. So
yeah,
it's really cool. We're talking about this concept of purpose, and I've got some questions for you as well. But
great.
talk a little bit about, your journey to Rice first before we get into that, and maybe some of the things you've learned. I realize you've had some journeys, but you grew up in San Antonio, I believe, and then came to Rice, and now are in Nashville. But what are some things that you've learned? And tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today. And you just recently celebrated a birthday, so happy birthday as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm an October baby, but yeah, I born in Dallas, grew up in San Antonio, um, public school system there, great Northeast Independent School District in San Antonio. Beautiful time in just that school system, to be honest. Just a short mention there, but yeah, I'm the youngest of three. My parents were full-time Christian ministry most of my life growing up, and moved to San Antonio to help lead a church in the city there. And yeah, so was grateful to grow up in a household that really has had that a deep connectedness to spiritual purpose in God, and a deep connectedness to a really loving and strong community of people, real diverse community of people as well through our church and others. And so I think that really set up, in retrospect, that really set up a lot of just the framework on which I see life through, and the way I think about people and about myself, just through the upbringing, bringing in the environment that I'm grateful that God placed me in through my parents and the people around in San Antonio. And yeah, we did a lot of different things as kids, a lot of activities, extracurriculars, and mainly in the sports side. That was kind of the heaviest initial expression of life for me and my siblings, playing lots of different sports. And getting into the music side was towards the end of elementary school, still very early, of course, but was grateful to uh, find myself living in both the fine arts and the sports side, for all through most of elementary, and then all the way through high school. And so that really stands as kind of a makeup of just myself and my upbringing, activity wise. And grateful for my parents setting that kind of environment for us to live and grow up in.
Absolutely. And,
Hmm.
I got a chance to meet your dad at the
Yeah,
concert, and we've
that's
seen
right.
each other. I'd seen you post some things. Y'all have got some incredible music y'all have done together, but it was great to meet him. And what an interesting background about being excellent in sports and, excellent in the arts as well. I think that is a connector of people. And, you talked about people several times and your purpose, but I think music and sports can bring people together. I can't sing or play an instrument like you do, but I was a DJ, and so I love
Oh,
music.
amazing.
And
Yeah.
so I've always loved music, and I played basketball and loved sports. And I think it just brings people together across a wide variety of backgrounds. But what have you learned, in sports and also in music about the connection with people and making an impact with people and collaborating with people?
Yeah, there's a lot of crossovers between both sides for sure. I think when it comes to building a career or finding success in both of those areas, the principles definitely carry over. I'll start there of kind of leaning into the skills that you have and knowing the discipline and the work over time that it takes to grow in those spaces. Those are definitely very similar on both sides. I think when it comes to impact and connection, you're right. There's like, I think it's kind of designed in us as humans to connect with like uh the sports and the competition components of things, and even as entertain as it's a form of entertainment, they are beautiful spaces for people to gather around, where they're
Yeah.
supporting your team or coming together as a team to work towards a common goal, right? So there's those communal things that bring people together and gathering them around. And you're right. It kind of, they do translate across cultures and across communities of people and even thoughts. Yeah, no, I think there is a beautiful through line between sports and music or fine arts in which they have the ability to bring people together. Right. And I
Right.
think it's awesome to be a part of those kinds of creative outlets, those spaces. And seeing that I have an interest in both sides and a skill in both sides of things, and being able to create in both sides has been really, yeah, I think it's been intriguing to see how much, yeah, I think this is almost like translatable skills of like, oh yeah,
Right.
I've been able to find success in that side, and I've been able to transfer a lot of those ideas and thought ways of thinking to do the same in the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
I just remember after you came through that year of our leadership program,
Yeah.
I kept hearing more and more things about you, and like, well, he's Mr. Rice, and he speaks all these languages, and he plays the cello, and he like, does Gabe do that? Yes, he does, and you've continued to do that.
Well,
What,
thanks.
what when you think about purpose, do you have, because we've talked about this and I've talked about this in a lot of groups, a written purpose statement or something you've
Hmm.
jotted down? Have you ever thought about that? A personal mission statement? Have you articulated that to where you've kind of written that down and you kind of live by that?
Yeah, I feel like my purpose statement. I appreciate you asking that because I don't think I have a a consistent um, phrasing for it. Um, and I think I want to. Now that you mentioned that, I think there's a lot of power in that. Um, my purpose does seems to land back on being an honest expression of stepping into the fullness of who God has created me to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's very broad, of course, but I think what that the way that directs me, it kind of gives me permission, I guess, internally to be flexible with my expectations of what decisions I could make with
Right.
careers or whatever that is, because who God is unfathomable, but he's also personable.
Right.
And so the way that he has designed each and every one of us is a way for us to journey and explore and learn about ourselves. And so me phrasing it in a way of like stepping into the fullness of who God has created me, to me, that connects and inspires me in the ways that it allows me to be a
Right.
journeyman,
Right.
journey person,
Yeah.
and learning about myself and what has God presented for me to step into,
Right.
uh, whatever that looks like, skill wise, relationship wise, activity wise. Yeah. So I think that's
Right.
kind of where I'm landing right now.
No, I mean, and that's good. That's a good place to land, especially what
Hmm.
you've said. And I think that it does have to be broad enough to cover other things. I think people sometimes get purpose confused with goals. Here's my
Mm,
purpose and this is my goal, or this is my
yeah. Yeah.
identity and my career, or whatever it might be. and it needs to be broader than that. One of the things I shared on a previous podcast is a mentor told me, we were talking about this concept of purpose, and I was probably asking him about a couple of things about I could go this way or I could go that way. And one of the things he told me, he said, this quote that just echoed in my mind, was that life is a series of assignments that
Mm,
gives clarity to our calling along the way. And I like that because whether you think about that in decades or assignments, or I'm here right now honoring God with my life, if it's broad enough and it's, like you said, an honest expression of who God has created you to be, then it allows you clarity about that
yeah.
calling in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think you're a great example of somebody who's done that, because you do have a lot of talents. You've been blessed with a lot of opportunities, and you've pursued that, with a passion and with purpose.
Well, thanks for saying that. Yeah, I love that quote that you mentioned. That hits the nail on the head for sure.
Yeah.
Because I found it can be paralyzing and also challenging and inspiring to have so many options to do things. Or like you trying to make the right decision is almost can almost seem like an impossible question to answer. And
Yeah.
what is the right decision, right? And
Right.
it's very subjective and it can change. The goalposts can change and shift in ways, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, I think yeah, that purpose question, I'm going to be chewing that some more because I feel like I want to refine my answer to that
Right.
even more so.
Yeah.
But I think it is, I really do resonate with being able to lean into the the posture, the attitude, or the approach of an openness to grow,
Yeah.
and an openness to, but a focus to align with the things that are designed within me as well.
Right. Absolutely.
Mhm.
No, I love that.
Yeah, yeah,
You mentioned a bunch of different words that it can be challenging. I wanted to pick up on that because for somebody who maybe has a lot of opportunities right now, or maybe they've been blessed with a lot of talents and they're trying to figure out what way to go, what has been challenging about that with you? Because you've made moves across the country and
yeah.
you've made, moves around that. Maybe talk about the challenges that are there and then the process that you went through to actually get clarity about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I didn't really fill in some of the, maybe the my story details along the way. So I'll fill them in here to answer
Sure.
the question. Um, but yeah, I think answering that, the idea about challenges and what challenges has come up and answering them in my journey. It definitely, the biggest started when I was considering where to go to college for sure, I'd say. And I think towards the end of my high school years, I was grateful. I was playing in the varsity orchestra and I was doing varsity sports and doing well. And I had a beautiful time in high school. And I definitely knew I was going to go to college for football and pursue that. And I got a number of scholarship offers. Um, and I think the challenge was making a decision, right?
Mm.
That's what's always one of the biggest challenges in life,
Right.
of like, what decision do you make? And I remember I was offered by A&M and Rice, and a couple others, but Rice and A&M were my top two because I didn't want to go too far from college, from home in San Antonio.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay in Texas, and I knew I had an interest in engineering, so I was kind of doing some research into the engineering programs at both schools, both great engineering schools. So all that to say, I do remember my first attempts to answering the challenge or approaching the challenge of decision making in a situation like that was asking myself the right questions, asking myself questions in which I can answer with the things that I know. Like, okay, what do I know? What do I desire at the moment? And I think even working to get to a place of clarity is a great starting point when you face challenges.
Yeah.
It helps
Absolutely.
you face them with confidence as much as you can. And then as things kind of came clear, I had I ended up I ended up committing to Rice. It was influenced by a couple things. Um, A&M wanted me to gray shirt after a while. I think it was kind of just when in the flow of recruiting, right, where scholarships were available. For those who don't know, gray shirting is when a recruiting class will take a scholarship from the next recruiting class the next following year, and basically your scholarship wouldn't take into effect until maybe one more semester. So it wasn't like they pulled my scholarship, but they were kind of reserving me. They had other scholarships reserved for other positions. So it was almost like a strategy. It was like I was a athletic, department thing, if you will, based on available scholarships and players they were recruiting and the timing in which I was going to commit or not. So all that to say that
Transfer
influenced
portal didn't exist back then,
there
so
was
that
no
was it,
transfer
right?
portal
So
back
that, yeah,
then. Yeah,
so
and I just felt that much very connected to, and so it was almost like I use that to say there was like different moments and things that of evidence, if you will, that kind of gave me more clarity or affirmation of like, okay, maybe I should take this step in this direction
right,
to answer this challenge. And so I think of that being one immediate challenge of like, what do you do? Like, what's the right decision? You never know what's going to lead to what.
right.
But going to Rice definitely ended up being one of my favorite decisions I've made in my entire life, for sure, in so many ways.
That's great.
And yeah, and I think post Rice, had a great time. Was an engineer by degree, did a lot of fun things. Really stepped into a lot of myself in so many ways, and did my best to just be present on campus with the various communities there, and played cello as much as I could, if I could. And it was a beautiful time. And post college, jumping into the corporate world, tried to go to the NFL. That didn't work out. Well, that didn't come together. But I was very content with that. And again, I think of that as another. I'm jumping over a bunch of challenges that
Yeah, no,
occurred at
this is
Rice, of
good.
course. But I think when I think of the higher arcing challenges in my life, for sure, they kind of came at those transitional points in my life. So kind of high school to college into the working world, and then in the midst of shifting careers. And I think as I've navigated challenges, those career shifts have been the some of the biggest. And I'll answer all the career shifts so in maybe one kind of phrase or thought. But I worked as an engineer out of college. I think you may be familiar with most of my kind of moving around a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I went to seminary part-time while I was working as an engineer, civil engineer. And yeah, it was just kind of tasting things. I started doing the American Ninja Warrior stuff and was kind of competing where I could, and then shifted out of that engineering job into the public sector and working in the government, doing policy work, and finished seminary, was doing a lot of ministry work and nonprofit organizing at the same time. And then I felt I got casted on The Bachelor music spinoff show. Another long conversational point there.
See,
But
this is what
that
I'm saying. Has Gabe done that? Yes. The answer is yes. He's done that. So you're starting to feel it.
and and again, this kind of was stepping into another major transitional point, and I'll kind of add some layers to this side here. But at the time, also, my mom's health was declining. It was a very
Yeah.
ambiguous state. She was diagnosed with a very unique form of liver and pancreatic cancer. And then my older brother, he also went to school for music. Extremely talented, loving, hearted person as well. But he was battling his mental health, and his mental health started to really, really take a really strong turn for the worse, just as my mom's health was on the decline. And so at the end of 2019, unfortunately, my mom passed away. And then my brother, he's been out of touch since then as well. And at the time, I was doing a lot of things that I had been doing, of course, post college, and just trying to continue to live life and move forward. And I think in the midst, that challenge there has been the biggest inflection point in my life, for sure, in so many ways. And I think of difficulties and challenges. I have often, the question of why me is always a thing, right?
Yeah.
I always ask myself, why not me, for better and
Mm.
for worse? Like, you never know what's going to come. And I think that also helps me with being a posture of humility and just trust and surrender.
Yeah. And a
When it
productive
comes,
question, right?
yeah, why not me? And I
Yeah.
think that's also a very inspiring question for me. Like when
Mm.
I think of possibilities, like why not
Right.
me?
Right.
Um, and so it's kind of, that question is something that kind of, that does pop into my mind, has popped in my mind. When that happened, since that all that stuff has happened in my life and my family's life, and yes, so approaching a challenge like that, and that through all that, through that Bachelor show and different things, that inspired me to step into music and
Yeah.
step into the creative entertainment world. And I moved to Nashville that following summer of 2020. And it's been 3 quick years of growing and growing in this creative professional side. And in the grand scheme of it all, with your question about challenges, I have really, I get excited when there's challenges now.
Mm.
I've always been attracted to engaging in challenge, and not because it's difficult, but because I know it's going to allow me to grow,
Right.
and present opportunities that weren't there initially. And I think there's a beauty that God works in the ways that God works through tension in life, and challenge is a form of tension. And I think of that, and I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned about going through challenges and transitions is what does it mean to find clarity, to make decisions in the spaces, but also not running from the challenge. And I think the
Right.
more you kind of face them head on for whatever that looks like, embracing the emotional colors that they create in your life and those around you, that does open up and create forms of growth and build. They really, challenges do create beautiful things, and change.
Wow, that so much to unpack in that. I mean,
So
that is so good. And I know, I mean, I remember some of those times we exchanged some messaging around, that when your mom passed away, and I had read about your brother. I didn't know all the things that were going on there, so I know that that was a very challenging moment for you. But
yeah,
it also seems like a galvanizing moment about some clarity that, and making that move to Nashville, going for music, and doing it, and it's worked out for you, and you're making a tremendous impact through that. And I'm sure you're propelled by some of the things that you remember about her and carrying that memory forward as well. Would that be true?
yeah, spot on. The irony about living through things that you don't want to experience is that they do create things that you couldn't have created without them,
Mm,
right? And I wouldn't be doing this if my mom didn't pass away. Like,
yeah.
I think I still could have done this if my mom didn't pass away, of course. But I
Right.
think you're right. This, going through that, has provide this very strange, mysterious, fuel and stepping point to get into this creative side and create the way that I am creating,
Right.
to do the things and becoming the person that I am doing, to live in the ways that I am. So it is a strange, dichotomy of
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. But so unique in how God works in and through all of
Yeah,
those challenges as well, and those the
yeah,
tension moments that we experience.
yeah,
We talk about purpose and talk about our plans, and I know, um, as far as I'm wired, and I know maybe you're wired as well, sometimes we feel like we're good planners or can move forward and know what we're going to do. But I think there's a balance there of submitting our plans to God and knowing what His purpose is for our lives, and how. And sometimes there are things, I mean, we read this and know this scripturally, that He can do more than we ever imagine, but sometimes we don't always live in that. But I think
yeah.
I'm in a season of life right now where there's some things that have happened in introductions to people and some other things where I'm like, that's crazy. I could have never planned that. And I feel like
Wow.
I'm a good planner, but I could have never moved everything to make that happen. It was only God. And can you speak to that maybe over the last, even the last year of some of the things you're doing now, but maybe it's the last couple of years of how maybe you've seen God move in a way that you've been praying about something, but you saw clearly it was Him and even more than you could have imagined?
Yeah. Too many. I think that's my favorite thing about God
Mm,
is that he does create things in ways that is more than we can imagine them to be. And when I moved to Nashville, I was building a career from scratch, and I knew that, and I did the best that I could of setting my expectations and writing out a list of kind of SMART goal style things, my high vision, my working goals, my
oh,
daily
yeah.
actionables. And I, again, a very kudos to things like what I was a part of with you guys
Sure.
for giving
Sure.
me the
Yeah.
tools and like
We talked
the
about smart
mentality.
goals. Yeah.
Yeah, the mentality to step into things like that. So I do that all the time. And I remember when I moved out, it was July. I mean, it was July 12th of 2020 was when I moved to Nashville, and all I knew is that it was a very peaceful decision to step in up here. And I was like, and I knew that expectation has much to do with everything, with how you pursue something and how that impacts you emotionally. And so I remember it's like, okay, I got to set my expectations right. So as I was kind of on my little whiteboard, I was writing things out, and the two high level kind of vision, different things I wanted to pursue was like, okay, building my musicianship and building my community is what I kind of wrote down as the top, and I kind of broke that down. Uh, Musicianship was as a cellist, as a songwriter, as a performer, and then that kind of broke down into how many co-writing sessions I was going to have with friends per month, and how many live shows it was I was going to try to play every month, different things like that, and amount of times I'm going to practice and different things. And the building community side was in the spiritual side. It was creating a space for musicians in Nashville to kind of come together, and even it being a spiritual kind of hub. And I share this story to share one of the moments in which of seeing that come together. And I'm a part of a community here called Songhouse, and they have a really big social platform. If you look up Songhouse Co. On Instagram and TikTok and things like that, but it's as I think almost a million followers exclusively on each platforms
Oh,
now, and it's grown exponentially. But it started out of God has worked through, I'd say, that vision in my heart, and then piecing the right people together in this space and where I live. I live in Nashville in a loft area, and I share it with a couple of roommates. And my buddy who owns it is a producer and a musician and an artist. And I met him right after I was on that Bachelor show, just a couple weeks before uh, the pandemic kind of closed everything down. And it was my first trip to Nashville. It was a very, very kind of, off the cuff thing. I was like, oh, let's go to Nashville. And I met him during that trip, and that kind of came full circle eventually, because I reached out to him. I was like, yeah, I'm moving to Nashville. And he's like, hey, I got a space in my room, in my loft that you can move into, hence this room that I'm
that's
living in.
great.
And then that led to, as I'm taking these activities that I wrote on my little whiteboard of like, okay, let me meet people and let me get out. And even in the midst of the ambiguity of the pandemic, I was able to progressively build some great relationships, had a great music team and a couple friends from Austin come up, who eventually met my good friend who owns the loft here, who's a successful producer and artist. And we all started collaborating, and eventually one magical day, it was in the spring of February 2021, there was a ton of us here in our space, all creating in different sessions. And then we all combined. It was like they had the idea of like bringing together to do kind of one mass kind of songwriting session camp thing, where we kind of separate into groups, and then we come back together in 30 minutes and share the songs that we wrote. And that ended up being the foundations of this huge community now that has an incredible reach on social platforms, and it
That's
has
so
helped
good.
launch some independent music careers in a really, really cool way. And so that has been one of the statement moments, or progressive things in which I've seen God transform, or turn. And again, it wasn't like, sure, it was a part of one of my visions of being a part of community here and building community.
Right.
And it had to do with a lot of other people's journeys as well. So I think of that as one of those statement moments in my journey here of like, oh, wow, God did way more than I could imagine with something, just a piece of my journey, and connecting that to a grander thing. It's pretty cool.
Well, absolutely. And I do a lot of work with athletes on sports
Yes.
psychology and sports performance. And one of the principles that we talk about is being outcome driven and process focused. And I'm going to go back to what you said, but in that, the people that I work with, I mean, they have big goals and they're outcome driven, but what the challenge is sometimes get them to be process focused and to really dive into that. And what you said, when you came to Nashville, it wasn't like I want to get a record deal or I want to get this or whatever. You said things that were process oriented. You said I want to build my musicianship, grow that, and get better at that, and grow community. And
Yeah.
then you broke that down into some more process oriented things about how you were going to do that. But it had nothing to do with the record deal or the song thing or the thing the gig you're doing now with For King and Country, which I want to talk about as well.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, that is so cool because you were trusting God in the process and being faithful with that. And He blessed that even more than you could imagine. That's just so good.
That's beautiful
And
framing. I appreciate you saying it that way. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, that's encouraging, I think, to people who are
Hmm.
pursuing goals because I see some people all the time that got to make the sale or got to do this or want to do that. And being present in the moment and being present in the process is really important. So,
It's so good. And I will segue into the For King thing as well.
yeah,
And the creative entertainment life is as much of a wild west as it may seem. And so
even in
in this,
Nashville and even in Christian
even in
circles, right?
Nashville, in every circle, it's, you take what you can get and then you
Right,
try to pay your bills and you try to continue to lean into the the yeah, the goals, the desires, and the talents you have, and such. And for me, I hadn't had a steadiness of opportunity, um, yeah, for 2.5 years, since being out here and being in the midst of it all. And again, just going out and meeting friends and meeting relationships. I had met Joel Smallbone, who's one of the brothers in the duo of For King and Country, at a mutual friend's wedding. Um, this was, I think, the summer of 2021, I think it was. And just been friends of him and his family progressively over time. I end up eventually collaborating with him and his wife, who's also a great artist here in town, on a Christmas project. And yeah, so, and then we go to the same church in town. And so I've just been friends and growing friends. And then over time, I think them getting to know me more virtually, at least from a musicianship standpoint, is also a part of it. But eventually what that turned into was this past March of 2023. Um, I was I had some very, very small little gigs I was playing at South by Southwest in Austin. And I just remember it. I was actually getting ready to go out to compete on American Ninja Warrior, which I did. Um, and it was like mid-March, and Joel had texted me. It was like, "Hey, what are you doing for the next 2 months?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a lot of time. I got some things," but I immediately got excited because I know asking about that time frame from someone like him, I know that's
what that
tour
means.
implications. Um, Additionally, I'll say one other thing is that in the last I think for apps in the last 2 years, I've had the growing goal of going on tour with an artist, either as a cellist slash background vocalist kind of thing, and being like a instrumentalist side person. And that's been a working goal of just kind of building the skill and meeting the people and presenting myself as someone capable and competent to do that.
Right.
And so it was always, it had been in my head of like, okay, eventually I think I'm going to connect with someone and hop on the road with them eventually. But again, that's as open-ended as it sounds. You don't ask people for that. People
Right.
ask you for those
Right.
things. That's how it works in the industry. You don't ask for those. You get
Share
asked to
that
do that.
again for the people in the back. They need to hear
That's
that
true.
right?
You
Because some
don't.
people are asking.
Yes, and maybe you do pitch yourself if you can, but they'll ask you if they want you.
Right. Right.
That's what it comes
Right.
down to.
Yep.
Anyways, this was one of those as high prize of an asking as I could have imagined. And so he asked me if I wanted to audition for a role that just opened up in their band. And they were more specifically looking for a cellist slash auxiliary instrumentalist, that can kind of hop around between things. And they have a lot of strings in their music. And so having that person be able to play that was extremely valuable. And so I auditioned. I talked to their bandmate and their band leader and their music director the next day, and they're like, "Yeah, just send us some performances send us some videos of you playing on these two songs." I'm like, "Okay, all right." And there, it's as broad as it sounds. Like, okay, I'll see what I can do. And
Right.
I was grateful to get a friend to help me piece together kind of a performance style, kind of multi-tracked video of me playing different instruments over the song,
Right.
these couple songs. And Yeah, they got back to me, I think the next day or so after I sent that in. This was over a course of like 3 days of from the
Wow.
asking to talking to the band leader and the music director. And the next day I did as much prep as I could have. And it was a crazy weekend. And I'll say because I had like a wedding gig and I flew back to Nashville after playing in Austin that week, just jumped up to a wedding gig and I played this youth conference just that same afternoon. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out time in which I can record and also send this audition in because this is everything. And
Right.
I was able to get a good friend of mine who's a credible musician to help me uh, uh, track and record these parts and give me and just be a helpful collaborator in me performing them.
That's so
So
good.
all that to say, within a couple of days after they asked me, and mainly because I also knew I had to get a response back to them very quickly because the tour was literally probably about 2.5 weeks from when they asked me to audition. So it was literally a couple weeks later. So I was like, I need to figure out if I need to cancel everything in my life to focus on this tour. So again, I knew the urgency I needed to take. And thankfully, about a day later after I sent it in, they're like, yeah, let's give it a go. And so they asked me to join, which is incredible. And it was a um, 32 city show tour um, across the U.S., 4 shows or 4 cities in Canada, 6 shows in Canada. We played 2 shows in one city in Canada. So it was over about a month and a half of just hopping around and playing, and I had to learn so much music in about 4 days,
That was the
and it
thing. I
was
remember you
insane.
posting that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that again, I think there's a lot to that, and I think with your question of there was the question that we were
Well, it
answering.
was just balancing, your plans versus his plans for your
Okay,
life,
yeah,
and that he could do being process focused, and that led to things like this. I mean, you talked about
yes,
science,
yeah.
but you also this is
This
another
is one of the
example of that, right?
yeah, God doing more than you can imagine, and I think
Yeah,
that's exactly it. And
yeah,
so all that to say that this is the biggest opportunity I've stepped into, been a part of in my career, absolutely so far, and I'm cherishing it as much as I can, and really making the most of it as much as I can, and it is mostly out of my control that it came to me, right?
right,
Perceptively.
right,
And I think that's the challenge and the beauty of it. And
yeah,
that's how God works, right? And
right.
creating and presenting opportunities that it's way beyond what you could imagine. And this is very much one of those things of like I had a vision or an idea of like, yeah, maybe this will happen eventually. Let me at least, continue to grow and hopefully I'll meet the right people. And
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, and I was doing a podcast with Ernie Johnson off of Inside the NBA on
Oh,
TNT. I was
awesome.
interviewing him for a book project I was working on, and one of the things we talked about is this quote about God hasn't called us to be successful, but He's called us to be faithful and available.
Oh,
And
that's
if you
great.
think about Moses or just whoever in your life, or you shared an example there, being faithful with that and then being available to, and you were both, and
Yeah,
that
that's
paid
great.
off for you, man. And I think you mentioned Gabe talks about learning music. He plays a ton of instruments. We went to see you in College Station and appreciated
Yeah,
that. It
that's
was great
great.
seeing you and seeing you.
Absolutely.
And my wife and I were just like, "Where's Gabe now? Now he's up on the stage now." So having the tenacity of a safety and the talent of a musician who can play multiple instruments probably helped you get the gig as well, because you were all over the place, and it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, if anybody
that's
hasn't
cool.
seen a For King and Country concert, you've got to go see him play, and you got to see Gabe in action as well. But I love it, and I love
Thanks, Mike.
everything about it. It was great, and love what he's doing through you in that. And one other quick thing about that, I think a lot of people who would move to California, move to Nashville, or move somewhere to go pursue something may not take that gig because they're going to be trying to get their music done or their thing done. And you mentioned you saw this as an opportunity to grow, and you didn't know it was going to be with them. But when you got there, it was in the back of your mind about doing that. But some people are not willing to maybe lay down some of the things they're doing and see opportunities, even as grand as this was and great as this was, and a stepping stone maybe to other things for you.
Mm,
People aren't always willing to do that.
yeah,
And
that's a
yet
good
you
point.
saw it as an opportunity, and it's been an incredible one for you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that because yeah, I write and release my own music as my own independent artist, and definitely far below the extent at which this band has been doing it for a number of years. Um, but that to say, I think you're right. I think it is being open to challenging your expectations of what things are going to look like for your
Hmm.
journey. And it really is most likely. I've definitely come to the conclusion that your journey is most likely not going to look like what you think it is.
Yeah.
Um, and that's okay. I think it's you can cast and set your expectations, and things may go as you hope for, but a lot of the times they'll be different. Um, and but again, that's everyone's journey is going to be different, and that can be the thing that sets you up for something that maybe you do have a desire to step into in time. And yeah, you just never know what steps are going to get you where you hope to be, right?
Right.
And I think if something is different here and it's going to put you there, it's like, oh, you never know what, opportunities always lead to opportunities, and they
Right.
set you up for something. And so I think you're right in mentioning that we can maybe shortchange um, how God is working in our lives because we get presented an opportunity that didn't calculate for what we thought was going to happen.
Right.
But it could be the exact thing that gets you to where you need to go.
Right.
But just because it was different, we can turn things down than we expect. So I think the openness to what, the step can look different than what we think it's going to look, but it may
Yeah.
be the right step.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, definitely. And they're definitely a creative group, and I think you're probably learning about that too because you're not just playing, music. I mean,
Yeah.
it is an
Yep. That's right.
experience, and it's so good.
Yep.
Just on that note, and I'm going to move on into a couple more questions. But
Hmm.
what's your favorite, maybe for King and Country moment, or favorite song that you like to play on, or what? Maybe tell us a quick story about that.
Sure. The coolest thing, what you're saying, Mike, for those who aren't too familiar, but the shows that For King and Country put on are very theatrical in nature, to where there's different platforms across the stage, and there's six band members, including myself, and then you have the two brothers who are they are the band. They are the Free King Country band. We are part of they are the instrumentalists in the band, if we will, but we are
Right.
also the band. Um, but everyone is a multi instrumentalist, which is really cool, and so everyone in diff we as we are playing, as the show gets planned and we rehearse it during different songs based on the parts that we're playing, we have different moments where we're over here, I'll play this part in this moment of the song, and everyone kind of is knows where to go. uh so it's like a sports team. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And I think in preparing for the show, I definitely, you're mentioning like the safety mindset and the music space. That's very much how I ended up preparing. To I had to I was kind of writing things out almost like from a memorizing standpoint. Okay, at this song I'm doing this, and at this point in the song I'm running here, and this point I'm doing this,
Right.
and then I even schematically kind of wrote it out. I kind of
Here's the
I wrote down
play.
this at the stage. I was like, I wrote a little diagram of this is what the stage looks like. At this point, I'm going to run here and I'm going to do this. So it was very much like a play design, which is funny. And so it is a very full circle thing of
Yeah.
my football sports background kind of coming into play here,
Oh
which is
yeah.
very, very fun and ironic. Um, but I think one of my favorite moments is connected to kind of that preparation of doing this. And I think it's one of my more active songs in which I'm moving around a lot. And I think it was there's a lot of favorite moments because every show is different in different ways. But I think it was when I think it was around maybe like show 7 or 8 in which um, I didn't have to look at my cheat sheet on my phone of like, okay, this is what I got to do next. But
Right.
I could just have fun, and I knew what I was doing, and I
Yeah.
had everything memorized very well. And I think it was kind of kind of in that range in which, yeah, I just felt very proud of myself. And I think that's the moment that comes to mind. It was kind of around that time in the tour, which I just felt so confident, or confident enough to like just live and actually just have fun.
Right.
And there's a song towards the front of the set. It's like a 23 song set, and there's like song. I think it's the second song, and I start I play a little piano part, an auxiliary piano part during most of the song, and I'm playing there. And actually at the front end of the song, I'm on this middle platform and I'm hitting this bass drum to start
Right.
out. It's really fun. It's really fun. And then
It's the huge one y'all have, right?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's the second biggest
That's like,
one, but
okay,
it's on the
gotcha.
middle platform.
Right.
And I start out there and I'm hitting this drum. It's really fun. And then that's at the intro of the song. And then for the verses and the chorus, I'm playing on the piano. And then during the bridge, I sneak away and I grab my cello and I hop up in the middle of the stage and I'm playing this cello part. And then I go back to the piano for the verse and the chorus and the verse. And then
Just
at the
crazy.
outro of the song, I run back up to that middle platform on the bass drum and I'm hitting it. And it's just like, I just remember in that moment in which I really felt comfortable and confident enough just to have fun. That was just
Right.
like, oh man, I'm really doing this. I just felt so proud of myself and so excited just to be able to like run around on stage and like
Right.
play these parts.
Right.
So I think that's what comes to mind when I think of like a favorite moment. I think we did a lot of fun traveling as well. And so
Yeah.
just being with the crew and being with the band is a lot of fun.
Well, it seems
Yeah.
like y'all have a good time together, and they include y'all in that. And thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that, because I wanted to make sure people knew, he's not just over there playing the cello and just sitting in a chair. I mean, he's
Sure.
playing
Yeah.
a bunch of
And we're
instruments
standing up.
all
We're
over the
standing up
place.
playing the cello, which is weird too.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This guy can jump around with the cello. He can do a lot of things with it. So it makes the cello cool. So, but yeah. So that's great. I like I said, I love the show. It was incredible, and my wife was familiar with some of the songs, but just I mean,
Mhm.
we just kept looking at each other and saying, "Man, that was great. Man, that was great." And so it was really good, and I'm just so appreciative for the impact that you're having through that and the platform that it's continuing to give you, Gabe, as well.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
Talk about maybe a favorite Bible verse or something, a verse that's meant something to you that you've put into action. I just in
Mhm.
sharing that, my we may have talked about this in the past, but my dad left when I was about 3.5, and my parents got
Mm.
divorced when I was 5. So I was raised by a single mom. But I often talk about that testimony of my mom just seeing Scripture lived out in her lives. I mean, she wasn't just a prayer warrior, and she did just quote Scripture. I saw Scripture lived out, by
Yeah.
things that she claimed, and then things that happened along the way for me, and to formulate, who I am today and our family and things
Mm.
I'm doing. But maybe talk about a verse that's been important to you and how you've seen that in action, in your life.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Thank you for sharing that about your life as well.
Yeah, yeah.
The immediate verse that comes to me is Romans 8:28, and we know that all things that God works for the good of those who loved Him, those who've been called according to His purpose. Um, and the direction of that passage for me, because it talks about formation,
Mm,
and that's what that formation into the likeness of Jesus in time through things, and working out for the good is not is I'd say means that things happen not because they're comfortable, or the good doesn't mean comfortable or to our expectations, but good means growth mostly, or formation, and God does redeem things. God has a work of redeeming situations and moments into so that we grow into the likeness of Jesus as we are stepping through it all, um, and relying on Him. And I think that has hung on me since my first really big challenge in life, and that actually came uh, at the end of my junior year in high school when I tore my ACL and LCL.
mm.
And this was like right at the beginning of like peak recruiting season.
Recruiting, yeah.
And I remember it was a very kind of out of the blue situation. I felt like I was really honestly in the best shape of my life at the time. I had I had opted out of playing basketball that year, so I was just focusing on training really hard and getting ready for track season. And after school that day was going to be our first track practice of the season, I remember. And then during that day, we had our football class period in school, and I just went to catch a ball, and I landed on my leg. I
Mm.
hyperextended it and busted my knee. So it was very out of the blue, non-contact injury. But I remember it was a very strange situation. Of course, first major injury in my whole life, And I do remember that verse. I don't even know. I don't even think I read it anywhere, but it was almost like a divine descent upon me of like Romans 8:20. I really don't know. I don't remember why
Right.
that verse came to me. I really don't. But it always has. It has remained as a statement, um, uh, memento and passage for me to trust in that, in the work, in the mysterious workings of God through
Right.
life and situations. And I think it is positioned my heart to be open to the possibilities, right?
Right.
And how God is going to redeem things that I don't think He will, or He's going to work in spite of me and through me,
Right.
ways. And yeah, so that's that one verse that has been a very thematic verse for me.
That's great. And
Mm.
I appreciate you sharing the tangible and practical application of that, that you talked about the descent of that on you in that moment. Because I think if you think about the last several years, I mean, people are searching about, well, how is this all going to work out? Or what's happening? Or can you
Yeah.
believe this? And it's always that, and you think about the news we get, it's always breaking news, this and that. And with technology, it can be great, but we're consuming so much that we were never intended to consume, as far as all these things are happening, and a
Yeah.
lot of which we have no control over. But we do have control over our purpose and living that out, and
Mm.
knowing also in who's got us, right,
Yeah, that's good.
and things working out for the
Yeah.
good. So
Mhm.
I got two more questions for you. I could talk to you all day
Please.
because this is great
Yeah.
stuff, man.
Thanks.
First of all, if for somebody who is trying to pursue their purpose, their calling, we've talked about it a little bit, but what advice would you give to them? Because we've talked about some specific things that you did, and I think it was really encouraging that all of those weren't necessarily outcome driven, although you shared that you know how to do SMART goals and you know how to do that, and you definitely have goals. But in addition to that, if somebody's just thinking about, why am I here, and maybe they've got
Mm.
a lot of opportunities, what advice would you give to them about how to walk in that and pursue that?
Wow. It's definitely advice I give myself for sure, that I will share. And that is, I think it starts with, I think, owning the reality that we are designed for purpose, for a purpose. I think
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
it's easy to abandon or even not think to start there sometimes, because we have to pay bills and we have to do the things that allows us to function in the society and the time of life that we are placed
right,
in this world, in the history of people. And but to think to even answer that question and affirm yourself and really hold on that and place that in you, of knowing that there is a greater thing that we are put on this place for, I think is the right starting point. Because it's yeah it you kind of can put the cart before the horse if you start trying to do things without maybe, or if you're taking activity or taking action without, without having that without I guess defining the why, of course, right?
right,
And the why being that we do have something that's there.
right,
And um that can be frustrating, even trying to hold on to that. And as I'm saying that, I'm like, man, that's kind of like, it's a beautiful idea, but what do you do with that kind of thing
right,
too sometimes,
right.
right? um
But I think to your point, you have to know that you have been designed for a purpose. And there's some people
yeah,
who that's the starting point because they don't feel seen, or maybe they see. I mean,
that's
y'all
good.
are in all these cities and I have all these concerts. And they, well, you may be designed for a purpose. I can clearly see it, what it is
Yeah, that's
now, but I don't have a purpose. I mean, maybe for other people, but I think that is key. I think you
hmm
you were talking about the transactional nature of life too. We can get caught up in just the job and all of that
mm.
and not see the broader purpose that's there. But I think also people are not seen, and they need to know that they're seen and that they have been created for a purpose.
Yeah, thank you for, I appreciate you saying in that way, because it's exactly that. I think we do live in such a easily, especially nowadays, with again the overexposure of knowledge or information, and being able to have a peek into way too much
Yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
life and things, and it's a high comparison
Mm-hmm.
geared world that we live in now,
Yep.
that we can live vicariously through people, which is very unproductive a lot of the times. And it can detract from our personal experience as well, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I think being able to be like, okay, now that the statement thing is like, I am here for design purpose, right? And that allows one to investigate. And I think taking that step of, okay, now what is that purpose? Now what are the things that get me fired up every day? Or, what are those abilities that God has given me that I haven't explored, or I have
Mm.
explored, but I haven't given time to grow them, or and I think it is kind of engaging regularly in question asking and investigating, and even getting people's feedback on ideas. And I think that's been the I definitely hold on to that a lot, of like asking questions, not to kind of overanalyze, but
Right.
asking questions because that's part of the activity of engaging um,
And
in
discovery. Right.
discovery. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying the word discovery. Exactly. I think we ought. There's so much to discover nowadays,
Yeah.
and yeah,
You
engaging
do a
in that.
great job of that too, I think, in reflecting and listening and journaling. And that's where a lot of the music that I'll see you post. And sometimes I think you're creating these just to have, hey, this is the process I'm going through right now. And so you have a
Yeah,
song and you may not even plan to release that song, but then it actually does. You end up doing it. But the original intent maybe was for you and then to share it with some other people to inspire them. And I know
yeah,
I can see that in you and the things that you'll post on Instagram or whatever, but also knowing you as a person. And thank you
yeah,
for that.
yeah. No, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that also just came to mind is that um, I think trying to identify the purpose, our purpose, can be intimidating a lot, because it seems like it has to be way bigger than it really is.
Yeah.
Because we live in such a comparative based world, and easy to do that it can be, we can easily think about. And there's a friend of mine here who's not a musician, but she's a good friend. And I just remember feeling like I needed to remind her of like, yeah, I live in the entertainment world, and it's designed around these marketing tools of Instagram and social media. And I understand the the intention behind it, and me, and the reason I use it the way that I do, but I also understand the impact that can have on the viewers, and it having this ability to be maybe cast not the right expectations of translating one's desires, and so I just say that to say, like, when identifying one's purpose, I think it is trying to keep it simple as
Right.
well. Like, it
Right.
doesn't have to be, oh man, I have to go find aliens on Mars, right? This big thing I gotta set off into the next galaxy. But our purpose is personal,
Right. That's
and
right.
personalizing it to, like, I think my purpose even if it is like, this is this job, this is this company that my parents are passing down to me, or I'm working here at this shop here, and
Right.
whatever it is, I'm taking care of my family. That whatever that personalized purpose is, I think identifying what that is, and then stepping into it fully after, investigating what it is, and then discovering, and taking a step
Yeah.
into a direction as you investigate, I think is over not yeah, is trying to simplify this journey as well
Yeah.
for me. Like, okay, what do I know, what do I have in front of me that can inform me just to take the next best step.
Right.
And then as you take steps, you evaluate, and you take a step and you evaluate, and you could course correct, and you can always change.
I love
And
that.
I think uh, I say investigate as like the second part of stepping into purpose, with the intention of opening one's minds to the possibilities, but hopefully not with but hopefully the idea of investigating doesn't keep one from taking action, right? I
I
think
love
that's
that.
all of
Because some
that.
people can acclimate in that investigation stage, and that was
Yeah,
interesting, but
it's
they
easy
never
after.
take action on it, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
great. Yeah. Yeah. In this comparison, we feel like we have to write the perfect prose or whatever. And
Sure.
then, comparison, people say, well, that's your purpose. And it's like, yeah, it brings
Yeah, that's
clarity
right.
in my calling every day.
That's
So
right.
I
Yeah.
understand what it
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
So I
great.
appreciate that question a lot of like advice I'd give to myself or to, I frame it almost as for myself,
I
but
love
also to
that.
others, of course. But yeah, it's, yeah, defining, that yeah, that we are assigned beings to live in purpose for sure. And then
Yeah.
engaging in regular investigation and taking what you have and taking actionable steps and
Yeah.
evaluate. As you take actionable steps, you kind of evaluate and take a
Right.
step and evaluate and be willing to course correct if you need to and not
Right.
be afraid of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just
Mm.
being present and aware. I mean, I see more
Yeah.
and more the
That's good.
interconnectedness of life and people working, how God is working in these situations. And sometimes we can get so focused on just what we're doing every day that we're not aware
Wow. Yeah.
of those moments, right? To
Yes.
do things. And oh, okay, I see what you're doing here, God. And I see how you're putting me in these conversations or these, some of the coaching I do now is based on that, where he was placing me in these. And at first, when people would ask for maybe some advice or something like that, I'd like be like, why are they asking me?
Mm.
And then, I realized he was putting me into situations where people were willing to share maybe some fears they were going through. And I started to see purpose and embracing, that conversation and praying about that, right? Because then it was like, well, this doesn't need to come from me. This needs to come from him. And so I think
Mhm.
that whole awareness and presence is really key. Let me ask you one more question or say one more thing. So I've mentioned this before, but I've been telling your story to a lot of groups I've been speaking about, and I'll talk about some of your accomplishments. I didn't include the Bachelor in that because I forgot it, but there's just so many to list, So, but I would talk about, Gabe's this guy, he can do this and this, and he's done this, but I talk about the Forgetting Country song, "What Are We Waiting For?" And I think you talked about a galvanizing moment for you, that set a trajectory for you to not waste time, and I love the line in there about asking that question, what are we waiting for? Why are we acting, like
Mhm.
wasting all this time like somebody's making more?
Mhm.
And that has really meant a lot to me because, you know, we can't be wasting time if God's put something on our heart, either personally or professionally, to do. And so I've been challenging groups
Mm.
to do that. But you know, you were doing that, I think, before you even learned to play it and have been playing it before audiences and stuff. But when you think about that song and you also think about, maybe how God has moved in your life around that and a challenge you would give to somebody who is maybe waiting on the right moment or waiting on the perfect situation or whatever, how would you, encourage them,
Mhm.
in that?
Yeah, I really, yeah, that song really inspires me a lot as well because I think we I have so many things that I'm waiting for as well, or like waiting to do. I need to do this, I need to do this, and I have to remind myself as well that um, I I I have everything that I need to do to take a step forward, and the perfect situation, the perfect time, or the perfect moment most is never really going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but there'll always be an opportunity to do something about with what you have. And I think my encouragement would be um, to not be afraid to mess up. If you even if you do make a decision, take a step or make a decision. Um, I think our fear is that we don't do it perfectly, which is probably always going to happen.
Right.
Um, and that's okay. I think that the quote of fear fear has killed more dreams than failure ever will.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
that's an idea and that does connect with me with the concept
That's
of
great. Yeah.
stepping into or waiting for things to happen or waiting for something to position itself for you then to do something. Um, and I think it does lean on that, giving yourself the permission just to try and mess up and give yourself grace to try,
Yeah.
and realize that's part of the journey to give something a chance to grow in your life, a chance for yourself to grow.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think that's a simple thought that comes to
That's
mind for
good.
me.
That's great. So I want to do a couple things here at the end. I want to plug a couple of things, and maybe if you have a couple of resources you want to share too. But um, for King and Country is doing. Are y'all in the middle of your Christmas tour yet?
We're
Or
just gonna get started.
okay,
Our
yeah, because
Christmas tour starts right around the end of November
okay,
this year.
good. So if go see Gabe and for King and Country and for King and for their Christmas tour coming up, it's going to be great, and it's a great show. And so that's it. You also have some probably a website or maybe some places they could check out your music. And I want you to maybe highlight a song that has really meant something to you that you've done independently, but also maybe share a couple of website resources or where they can find you as well. So
Yeah, great. So my personal website is just gabebaker.com.
okay,
And so you can find links to all the different social media sites and different things I'm doing there. I'm really active on Instagram the most. So if you put the before Gabe Baker, you can find me. So the THE Gabe Baker. And then,
great follow.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. And I the song, there's a couple songs that I really connect with me a lot. The one that just came to mind right now it's called The Death of Superman.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorites that means a lot to me. And the concept of the song, the tagline of the song is that before I could fly, Superman had to die inside of me.
Mm.
And I think, growing up in the sports culture that I've grown up in, me being an athlete um, and being a man and being strong and all the things that come with that.
Yeah.
It comes in other cultural situational things that have informed the way I live in relationships and in relationship with myself as well.
Mm.
I say that I'm grateful to have really the last few years and before that have stepped into um, just a really growing place of just emotional honesty and simplicity there, and being okay to be vulnerable, being okay to just to live in all the colorful emotions that are me and not suppress others because I'm afraid someone may accept me or not for that, or because it may be more socially acceptable for me to be stronger here. It's like, no, that strength is found in vulnerability and honesty. And so that song really means a lot to me in my journey of like not holding back all that I have to offer as me. And that has much to do with being just the full emotional self that I am through the ebbs and flows of life. If it means I got to be angry now, I'm going to be angry. I'm not going to maybe uh, maybe do bad things when I'm angry or whatever it is, but don't suppress the emotions that are honestly expressing in me.
Right. Love that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I think a lot of people need to hear that because I think we can get in a mode of playing Superman or feeling like we have to
Yeah.
be Superman in so many situations. There's so much depth to that song, and you mentioned the hook there. That's so key because I think that, and ultimately, that's where we find humility in God, right? I mean, that's where we have to make sure that we're going to reach the point at some point of the limit of our human strength and
That's right.
ability to handle situations. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love that. I was hoping you
Spot
were
on.
going to say that
Spot
song,
on.
but I think that was one of the first ones I saw you play, and I think and post something about it. And I think
Thanks.
a lot
Yeah.
of people need to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. That's one of my favorites. So
Yeah,
thanks for asking.
absolutely. So, well, Gabe, I really appreciate you making time for this. I know this is going to be, an inspiration to a lot of people. You are, and just keep doing what you're doing and keep following him. I really appreciate the journey that you've been on and what God's doing in and through your life. So,
Well, thank you, Mike. I'm honored to be a part of this. So
okay.
thank you for what
All
you do
right.
as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right.